Everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. This is Jessop's Journal. Gustavo, great to see you.
Great to see you.
Let's go chat.
Absolutely.
It's time to sign into Jessop's Journal. I'm Doug Jessop. In this episode of Jessop's Journal, I have Dr. Gustavo Ferrer. So, Gustavo, or Gus, or whatever you want me to call you today, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, you know, it's interesting. We were talking a little bit before, you know, and you've signed in the book and everything, and I did not realize, and I'm going, wow, okay, this is kind of cool. So, I'm very pleased to say that you are my 52nd interview, so you are actually the 1 year mark of Jessop's Journal.
That's great. Thank you.
Great to have you on here. Gustavo Ferrer. Am I saying that correctly? Okay.
That's fine. That's right.
But technically, it's Dr. Gustavo Ferrer, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but just what kind of doctor are you?
I'm a pulmonary and critical care doctor. I'm trained in internal medicine and went for training on lungs and critical care medicine.
Oh, okay.
As well.
Well, talking about that stuff, you know, we are social distancing. We did the mask, and okay, you know, we are hand sanitizing. Yeah, this is from the folks at Five Wives. It really is Jessop's Journal hand sanitizer. So, and you can take some of that with you.
Thank you.
You know, before we get into the medical stuff, I want to find out more about you. So, where are you from?
I'm originally from Cuba.
Really?
Yep.
What was it like growing up in Cuba?
I'm from the eastern part of Cuba, which is close to Guantanamo Bay. But my hometown is in the hillsides of Guantanamo. Guantanamo is a valley, and it has the bay. So I live in the hillsides. It's a very small town, about 700 people, give or take, and it remains about the same today. It's a very, very small town, farmers. We are mangoes producers.
Ooh.
And that was my childhood there.
As a kid, do you remember what your first job was? Your first paying job?
My first job was to put back the animals in the dens at the end of the day, so bring them back home. So I used to go to school in the morning, and when I got back home in the afternoon, so my job was to go after the cows and sheep and other animals that we have, so that you bring them back home and protect them.
There you go. Very cool. You know, there's always somebody in your life that just has an interesting impact. I have a sneaking suspicion it might be your Abuela.
That's right. I grew up really close to my grandma's house. My grandma she was highly educated. She read a lot. She spoke French.
Really?
And she wrote poetry, and I think my passion and curiosity for research and writing and all of that came from her, and I saw her helping people. She was known as kind of the healer of my town, because she was very knowledgeable in many things, but she was very knowledgeable in herbs and natural remedies. So I saw her helping the community, and that always intrigued me, kind of, and I always want to explore a little bit more about it. And that's probably the beginning of my desire to pursue medicine and helping people.
Very cool. Okay. So give me an example of a herbal remedy that your abuela would have taught you.
Absolutely. You know, growing up, whenever, and that's the beginning and the origin, the introduction of my book, Cough Cures, I talk about it. Whenever somebody has cough and colds in my hometown, we have a special type of sage that is grows predominantly in the tropical countries and a lot in Cuba, in the eastern part of Cuba. My grandma used that sage and extracted the concentrated part of the sage and gave it to people with honey for cough. And I've been using this forever. I still use it with my kids. I put it in the book. There is actually now research pointing toward that it has potential to reduce the cough as a cough suppressant. And I remember vividly seeing my grandma giving that to people, to my moms and family when I was just, I don't know, 5, 6 years old.
Now, I'm the guy that does a lot of the garden segments at the TV station, and so I admit I'm a plant geek. But it is interesting to see, on the one hand, there are people who go, plants, no, you need something in the lab. But then you look at things like digitalis, okay? Digitalis is a flower. It's a beautiful flower. But, it's foxglove. And quite honestly, you do not want your kids or grandkids eating that stuff because it's highly toxic. Yet it makes a medicine that can help people with heart attacks. How did you get involved in the plant research and how that, those things interact with medicine?
I always wanted to do that, but I went to med school in Cuba, and the med school format of Cuba is entirely Western medicine, which is the standard kind of globally. And when I was in med school, I always had that curiosity because in the most common things that humans need, treatment for pain, treatment for flu, coughs, we resolved to go back to those original remedies. And it doesn't matter if you were the top professor in med school or wherever you go, they resolve to go back and use honey and some other herbs and tea when they're passing by through common colds and flus. And so I always had that curiosity and I want to explore that. But it wasn't until 20 years later that I actually decided to write the book Cough Cures. And the reason is I did my training. Originally, I studied medicine in Cuba and I studied pulmonary medicine in Cuba. And I came to America and I did everything again. I went to Texas for my internal medicine degree. And then I went to GW in Washington, D.C. to George Washington University for pulmonary and critical care. And from there, I joined the Cleveland Clinic. When I was at Cleveland Clinic, Cleveland Clinic is always thinking ahead and in terms of how to approach medicine and treat people. And at Cleveland Clinic, I approached the chairman of my department and I asked him that I want to open a cough clinic. And the reason is that in the Mayo Clinic and some other institution across the planet, actually, reputable places open cough clinics because cough is one of the most common reasons that people go to a doctor.
Yeah.
And an unresolved cough is also an incredible problem. The year that I opened my cough clinic, over 10,000 people signed up overnight in an online clinic that was open in London. Because it is a bothersome issue. So and he gave me the okay. Short after seeing several patients with cough and chronic cough, I realized that the great majority of them were using tons of over-the-counters. They were using tons of natural remedies, herbs and tea that I have no clue, and I did not understand them. And I embarked myself in diving deeper into that, and I think somehow that brought me back to my roots and connect me to my grandmas. And so in doing research, I collaborated with a Harvard grad nurse that is an herbalist, and she lives in Boston. And we looked carefully into all the herbs and remedies for common colds and flu that people have used through the centuries. And we put it on an easy-to-read book, kind of full of stories, and that's my book, Cough Cures. So when I look back, I think that connection came from there, and it helps me dive deeper into it. But to your point, it is part of the forgotten history of medicine that the great majority of the wonderful medications that we have, they're coming from plants and nature. And that was the way that we healed people for thousands of years. From the creation of times until the last 100 years or so, we were using plants and teas. And we still go back to plants to find origins of new chemicals and substances.
Right. Talking about forgotten remedies and things, I remember I read a study that there was this village in Finland during World War II. You know, they were isolated and everything, and they wanted something to sweeten their food. And I don't know how in the world they came up with it, but apparently they used the bark of birch trees or something like that. And then found out later that there was a weird little thing that nobody in that village got cavities. It's like, okay, that's kind of strange. Are you familiar with that story at all?
Absolutely. It's you know, been dedicated to do research for the last 5 years or so. The use of xylitol, that was the origin of that incredible story that penetrated the world of oropharyngeal, but also the nasal cavity as well. Is an incredible molecule that is found natural. It's a natural sweetener. It's a sweet alcohol-like chemical, which has incredible power for activities, and we're exploring that across the board. Even today on COVID-19, we're studying xylitol and the impact that can have, which we have evidence that it works phenomenal.
Really? Okay. I did a story recently. There were these studies that showed that basically, okay, the COVID virus is, you know, most of it's in your nose. I have to admit, that seems just kind of logical. The fact that they had to do a study to me is kind of a little weird, but you know, you got to prove everything, right? But there was something in one study that said if you could deactivate the virus that causes COVID from, I guess, attaching to your nose, that you'd have some pretty cool stuff going on. What exactly does deactivate mean?
So when you know, we have now about 6-7 months of the really diving deep into COVID-19 and the impact in humanity, and I will say a really good study that it illustrated what's going on and what should we do. It was developed and performed at Chapel Hill in North Carolina, and they did a fantastic job mapping the infection all the way from the nose all the way to the lungs, and they found that the largest concentration of receptors where the virus is attached, they are concentrated in the nodes. And whenever we develop the inflammation in the lungs, it's because it's trickling down into the lungs. Okay. So that study then concluded that two things we should do. Number one, it has a good argument for the use of masks. Mechanically, they're blocking the virus from spreading and infecting other people. And number two, it is the place that we should be targeting to either kill the virus or block the entrance of the virus to the cells. And that has actually triggered an enormous amount of group of people studying that across the planet. There are many companies, even Remdesivir was attempting to do something intranasal. Vaccines have been trying to do it intranasal. But from here to the time that we develop anything other than vaccine, I think we have incredible arsenal of things that we should be using today, and this is where we focus our research. So we, back in March, we contacted Utah State University, the research virology lab, and we asked them to look into some of the medications that we were developing together with a company from here, from Utah. And we asked them to test it in vitro, which is the first thing that you do to see the impact against the virus. And so our study were fascinated. We found that in matters of minutes, 99.7% of the viruses are killed by a component in the nasal spray that it is in the market, been in the market for 20 years. Really? Subsequently, out of Tennessee, there is another study that they looked into xylitol, the molecule that we're talking about from Finland, and they did a different study. We looked into how to kill the bacteria, the viruses. That's our study here from Utah. But they looked into how to block the virus from getting into the cell. They were studying something else that can kill the virus, but they found that xylitol can also block the entrance of the virus to the cells. So we then sent that to Geneva, and Geneva, they did another study and they ran it, and they found similar results, that the spray can actually kill the viruses, so the COVID-19, and some other viruses as well. So we then launched a clinical trial. We went through all the legal hoops that you need to go through.
Oh, yeah.
And I contacted tons of friends in other countries. So we are in few Latin American countries. We're studying today the nasal spray. We are studying this in South Florida, and the first group of patients that we study about a month ago are they're going to be published this week. We wrote a paper, and the results of the first 4 patients is fascinating. People with mild to moderate symptoms that were having fever, cough, people that were a smoker in that group, and we put it on the nasal spray, follow them daily. We checked the oxygenation, we checked everything on those patients daily for 7 days, and on day 6 and 7 we repeated the swab, the PCR, and then we did it twice, and all these patients have no COVID at day 7. And repeated two tests consecutively, and they are negative. We saw the same results from the data coming from Latin America, and we're in that process today of finalizing, gathering the large number of patients so that we can do a proper statistical analysis and go out there. But we're extremely excited about it because this is here and this has been in the market. We don't have to recreate something. It's just reformulating something that already exists and using properly for the treatment of COVID-19.
And of course, you already have the safety data because xylitol has been used for forever. You're a doctor from Cuba, and you find yourself in a South American country, and some crazy stuff happened. You want to tell me that story?
Absolutely, and that's the way that I end up in America. I was working for the United Nations University in South America. I was an incredible time. I was in the middle of the jungle with an incredible team of people from all over the world. We were doing research and we were working every single day, but it was fascinating. In the year 2000, a new president came on board in Venezuela, and Hugo Chavez, and he decided to stop all international research. I decided to come to America. I didn't want to go back to Cuba, and they were threatening Cubans that were in Venezuela at that time that they would be deported back home and so on. So in my first attempt to leave Venezuela, at the airport, they caught me, and I was waiting for my airplane right before takeoff. They took me to a room, and the next thing I noticed, and in the next 15 minutes, I was in prison, and I was getting interrogated left and right. They had confused me with somebody, and they also were saying that if I was one of those Cubans that was trying to leave the country. I ended up in a penitentiary for several days, and I have a good friend that we have agreed to that when I get to America, I will call him back, so that he knows that I was safe. Leaving Cuba, living extreme regime. It's extremely difficult, and so you gotta handle everything very careful. You have to communicate with this little number of people so that your plans are not torn by them and destroyed. So I was in that process. And my good friend realized that I haven't called him in a few days, and he went on and he found out that I was in prison, in the local prison close to the airport. So by day 5 or 6, I can't remember exactly, they were trying to take me to the state penitentiary. And on my way to the state penitentiary, I was sitting in the back of the car, handcuffed, and they were driving, and all of a sudden I hear that they brake drastically and run to one side, and they opened the door and then started screaming, "Go, go, go, jump, jump!" And I have a SUV next to me, and they pull me with my handcuff and throw the keys.
Gosh.
And and then we ran off. So he managed to get me off the hands of the police. That was a fascinating thing, and we drove around, and he took me back to the airport, and I flew that night to Atlanta, and I landed in Atlanta, and I was lost in the airport for hours, and I couldn't make a phone call in one of those handheld 25 cents
So we're talking a couple years ago. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I was there in the airport, and fascinating thing that happened was trying to get a ticket, and I was speaking with a lady that didn't know anything of English. I did not understand the language at all, and the lady was helping me and take a flight to Miami, or book a flight to Miami. And I only have about $100, and the ticket was about $180. And right behind me was another lady that she was listening to the conversation, and she walked in and she asked me if I was Cuban, and a few questions. How long have you been in the area? And you need some help? And I say, yeah, absolutely. And the lady offered to pay my ticket. She paid my ticket. I offered to pay back, to give the $100. She didn't give me her name or anything like that, and she just told me, just go out there and do something good with your life.
Wow. Wow. So you had a little guardian angel.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, you had, some family members that actually were from America.
That's right. My grandfather, his family originated in Tampa many years ago in the 1800s, and they moved from Tampa to Puerto Rico to work at Vieques at the Bay in Puerto Rico. My grandfather from there went to work at Guantanamo Bay in the year 1912.
Really?
Yes, and so my grandpa went to Cuba. So from America to Puerto Rico to Cuba, and he bought land in Cuba, and my family, was born in there. So he has another brother that also did the same kind of trip to Cuba, and so most of the descendants are in the eastern hillsides of Guantanamo.
So when you flew from Atlanta to Miami, did you know anybody there? I mean, were you just kind of going blindly, or did you have somebody to go see?
Kind of 75 blind. I did know some people and friends and family, and I called a lady that I was taking care of her father back home in Cuba. She is from my hometown, and she opened her house to me, and she was phenomenal. She helped me and she guided me initially.
So how long have you been in the U.S. now?
20 years.
20 years. Do you have any children?
I do have 3.
Okay, names and ages.
I have my oldest son. His name is Diego. He's 20 years old. My oldest daughter name is Amanda. She is 18. And I have youngest daughter Lauren. She's 17.
Wow. So
back to back.
Bunch of teenagers. Oh boy, it's exciting at your house,
That's right.
So when you talk about growing up in Cuba, do they have a clue kind of what, I mean, because, maybe I'm wrong, but I got the lifestyle between the U.S. and Cuba is got to be kind of different.
It is. It's a kind of 180 degrees contrast between each other. My town is a town that everybody, 700 people, we know each other. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of familiarity. There is a really sense of community. People help each other a lot. My kids, growing up here, I studied my initial steps of medicine in Miami. My 2 older kids were born, and then we moved to Texas to do residency, and then to Washington, D.C., and then back to Miami. So we were constantly moving. We're back to Miami now for more than 10 years when I joined the Cleveland Clinic. And somehow there is a longing for home. I wasn't allowed to go back to Cuba, but in 2013, they lifted that prohibition, and I went back and I took my family over there, and my kids went over there, and they're fascinated with their roots, their town. They speak Spanish. We're talking Spanish with them. I wanted to be multicultural, and to learn to understand other people and other situations. So, and we're always are referring to, I used to do this, I didn't have shoes, I didn't have this, and they know the background stories, they know it very well.
So what do you think that they were the most surprised to when you guys actually went to the old hometown? What do you think would be the thing that they were the most surprised with?
Even today, my kids talk about this, seeing big family, having dinner or talking for hours at the dinner table. So that was, we strive in our house. I would say 99% of the days we have dinner together, and I think it's a great tradition that we have from home. And I think it's the place that you check and balance things with your family. We grew up with that roots and engraved in our hearts. So my kids, when they went back home, they saw that and they were fascinated. But also fascinated with the nature in my hometown, and also how people are contained with almost nothing, And the contrast here is we have so much, way too much sometimes, and you go to those places and you see people that have almost nothing, but yet they are happy somehow and content with their lives. Sure, they want to do better. They want better aspirations, but I guess they're not spoiled by the excess of things.
Well, I was raised with a phrase: "Remember where you come from." Okay. Is your grandmother still alive?
No, she's not. She passed away years ago. She was 96 when she died.
And your grandmother's name was?
Juana.
Abuela Juana.
Abuela Juana.
Abuela Juana was known as the healer. Now you are a internationally recognized doctor. If Abuela Juana was sitting over there and she saw her little boy, her little grandson, what do you think she would say?
Oh boy. I know she's going to be very proud. She was a fascinated person. She very knowledgeable. She instigated in all of us the idea of curiosity in arts, curiosity in reading, pursuing knowledge. If she were to be sitting there, I think she'd be crying.
Yeah. Last question I like to ask people, and it's kind of, in that same vein. This is my journal. It's Jessop's journal, so yeah, okay. And the folks at Rustico made your very own journal.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
I understand that you kind of like to write things down.
I do. I journal every single day, and I have a leather-bound journal that I...
Well, you've got a new one. There you go. So the last question I like to ask people is, Rustico has a little hashtag called Leave Your Mark. You're a journaler, you're doing that, all kind of the stuff. So let me get official here, put on the broadcasting voice. Dr. Gustavo Ferrer, how do you want to leave your mark?
That's a fascinating, excellent question. Years ago, I read a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. I'm an avid reader. I try to read a couple of books per week. And in that book, the first chapter, he mentioned this idea of what do you want in your tombstone? What do you want for the end? What do you want for your life? What's the main goal? So, and he was trying to frame that life is finite, and we should be thinking about our marks in this planet, and that will help us frame the things that we do. And I had given thoughts about it over and over, and I would say simply, I want to be remembered as a dedicated husband. I love my kids and my family. If I'm capable of training my family, my kids, in the way they should go in life, I'm going to guarantee that I'm going to help enough people in the future through them. That's mark number one. Mark number two is I've been blessed to be a physician. I love my profession, and I strongly believe that there is value in the research and things that we're doing today. I strongly believe that these are legacy moments for the things that we're doing, introducing medications that have the potential to help with COVID, even with influenza. We're testing a lot of things today that may help a lot of people. And the goal is to help as many as we can, not only here, but also in other places. And the last one is I do want to go back to my hometown and help. I do.
Well said. Well, thank you very much for coming on Jessop's Journal. There are other people I want to thank. Of course, you know, it's Jessop's Journal, so you got to thank the people with Rustico. We are doing the hand sanitizing. Thank you to Five Wives. And yeah, they do make some adult beverages as well. The other one is, you know, I'm the guy that wears hats on TV, so thanks JW Custom Hats. And of course, you know, there are two people that keep me looking good. The folks at Taylor Cooperative do all my clothes, but the guy that really needs to get the credit for both of us looking good is that guy right there. Hi, Ed. Here's the thing I want people to remember. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. With another entry in the Jessop's Journal and Gustavo Ferrer, I'm Doug Jessop, ABC4 News.